Well, the BRICS Business Forum meeting is now underway ahead of the official start of the summit this afternoon. Several stakeholders are gathering at the Sandton Convention Centre. They will discuss different sectors that will drive economic growth in the trading bloc, including agriculture and tourism. Now, let's bring in Rofhiwa Madzena, who is live at the Convention Centre this morning, to give us a picture of what to expect today. Rofhiwa.
Good morning to you, Baron, and to the rest of our viewers. Indeed, the BRICS Business Forum is currently underway with one of many panel discussions that are set to take place today. With me, I've actually got one of the BRICS Business Council members, Stavros Nicolau. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and it's an important conversation that we're going to have on a number of issues over the next 3 days. Are you going to be engaging some other delegates later on in the afternoon? And at the top of mind, which is something we discussed this morning, was other African countries becoming part of this trading bloc, but also the incorporation of what exists in terms of the Africa Free Trade Agreement. How do we create that alignment as more African countries look to become part of the bloc?
Firstly, let me say BRICS on its own is a very significant economic formation. Although it's not formalized, if you look at the 4 BRIC markets, Brazil, Russia, India, China, they constitute around 40% of the world's population and around 32% of global GDP. So these are very big markets with scale, volume and size for any South African business. So that's the first thing we need to recognize, that from a market access perspective, if we create the right conducive and enabling environment, this represents a significant opportunity for South African business. Now, we have partly capitalized on that, and we should recognize that BRICS is reasonably new, but the trade from South Africa with the rest of BRICS has demonstrated significant trade growth. Okay. However, we also need to unpack what that means, and we need to drill down a little into the numbers. And what we have noticed by way of a trade pattern is that we tend to export a lot of raw materials and then import value-added finished products back into our own country. So we've got to use these trade deficits constructively and positively to identify the opportunities that can be created for South African businesses to export to these very sizable markets. And in fact, last week there was an inward buying mission from China, which yielded 40 billion rand worth of exports of South African products to China. And those are the type of things we've got to do, and that's how we've got to best use the BRICS conduit and the BRICS platform to grow our export opportunities. But we first need to get economies of scale back home here. That's a starting point. Now, you raise the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Africa is a highly fragmented, disaggregated market. I mean, people assume it's one single market. It's actually not. So organizing Africa into a free trade area, and 44 of the 54 African countries have ratified the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. What does this aim to achieve? It aims to aggregate these markets. So all of a sudden you've got size, you've got scale, and you've got mass, and you can leverage that to do business, to attract investment, to improve and increase trade, commerce and business. Yeah. Now, South Africa is the fulcrum between the African Union, African Continental Free Trade on the one hand, and on the other hand, these 4 massive BRIC markets. So we're the fulcrum, and that's the benefit that we are seeing.
Yeah, and you spoke about an enabling environment earlier on, and this is a discussion that always rears its head in terms of the regulatory environment and, policy changes that would need to happen, structural reforms, to create an enabling environment for business. Based on your engagements with the various stakeholders within this trading bloc, do you think that there has been an active effort to change the environment to make it a little bit easier for business to do business in our country or the other countries as well, but also to introduce new entrants, younger, smaller businesses into the market as well?
I think we've had a number of notable successes, many more to go, of course. But we are fledgling. I think, you're up against trading blocks and economic formations that have been around for decades, if not a century or more. So it is fledgling, and what I like about these type of engagements, including the one today, there's the BRICS Business Forum, but this was preceded by the BRICS Business Council meetings, which is constituted of 9 different working groups, and each of those working groups represents a particularly high potential sector. So it could be agribusiness, it could be manufacturing, it could be infrastructure, it could be aviation economy. So there are 9 different working groups or working streams, and these streams set about discussing some of the practical issues that need to be resolved so that you do get a more conducive and enabling environment. And there have been times where it's required a change in business visa protocols or regime, and that's been achieved. We've been able to succeed in doing those. I'm just giving you one example. So these are the type of enablers that we need to continue working through, so that at the end of the day it's seamless for business people. There's a discussion around a business visa right now in Africa, right? Because the contention in Africa is that the infrastructure is not there, but there's also no movement of people. So business people want to come here, but they don't get visas. So there is a discussion around a business visa. So these are the practical, real operational issues that we need to be seized with, so that we can further enhance trade in the continent, but also with the BRICS countries.
In your engagements throughout the next 3 days, Stavros, what would you say are going to be some of the key investment areas you'll focus on that will ignite economic growth, which a country like South Africa so desperately needs?
I'm going to point you to today's program, because that covers many of the key areas. And in fact, as we're sitting here, I'm listening in the background to a session on energy transitioning. And we've got to recognize, and as business we do recognize, we've made commitments in terms of COP 2017 to move towards a greener energy supply. But there's also the here and now, and you can't afford to shed jobs and damage the economy too much right now either, because there's so many headwinds. You don't need to start introducing more headwinds. So a thing like, how do we best transition? It's like hydrogen energy, for example, solar, wind, battery. You then start linking that to electric vehicles, to the EV sector. So the automotive sector is a very important sector in this country, as is mining, as is commodities, as is pharmaceuticals. These are all the sectors that we've identified as particular trigger sectors. But none of them can succeed if you don't have the infrastructure, sustainable energy, gas, if you don't sort out some of the security and safety concerns in the country. So there's a link between these two things, right? But what unquestionably, responding to you earlier, is important is the discussions that are taking place today around energy. How do we open up trade in Africa? How do we consolidate the Africa Continental Free Trade Area? What can we do to boost the agribusiness, because we've got so much arable land on the continent? These are the important conversations that are taking place today.
Thank you so much for joining us. That is Dr. Stavros Nicolaou joining us this morning to unpack some of the key themes that the BRICS Business Forum will be looking into. I want to take you to Moloto now, who we understand has the Energy Minister, Khutzienso Ramokgopa.
Out of this place in the next few minutes.
Right, that was our eNCA's Rofhiwa Madzena, of course, live at the Sandton Convention Centre. Very important what Dr. Stavros Nicolaou just mentioned there. Of course, important for us to use this BRICS platform as South Africa to grow our exports to the other BRICS countries, especially China. But we'll touch base more on that